Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I'm Chuck Everson, your host from Villanova University, and my co-host, my buddy, my pal, Dr. Sonny Spera from Syracuse University. How are you, Sonny?
Good. That was a Ralph Cramden introduction. I like that. That was
Yeah,
good, man.
well,
I'm
yeah.
Norton. That's
You
good.
know what? I never know what I'm going to say, Sonny, until I say it, and
Neither
including
do I.
such gems as Root Canal Royalty and the Cavity Cape Crusader. All of that stuff
Listen,
just rolls, man.
You don't know what you're going to say? I have no clue what you're going to say.
No, and people think that like I have questions written out for our guests. I don't. It's we kind of that's why it's so organic, I guess, because we just talk like we're having a regular conversation. So,
Well, hey, we got Syracuse in the house today, baby. I
yeah,
know
the
he's
Orange
been a
again,
lot of
that's
places,
great.
but he's a Syracuse guy through and
And
through.
the Friars in the same person. How about that?
I'm not going to give that. He's an Orangeman. He's done plenty of time after it, but he cut his chops on the Orange campus. So that's my guy.
Hey, listen, another Renaissance man kind of thing. He wrote a book.
Yep.
Basketball warfare.
Yep.
He has a podcast. He has his own website, kevinmcsports.com. So he's got a lot of things going, and he was a journalist. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, and we'll get this thing rolling. Our guest today was 30 years at the Providence Journal, Sonny. He covered everything New England and Boston, and he was there at the right time when Boston started finally winning things.
Right.
So he got to cover the World Series, the Super Bowl, Tommy touchdown, all of these guys, the NBA championship.
Breaking the Bambino curse, huh?
Yeah, well, that breaks my heart, Sonny.
I know. I just threw it out there. I'm a Mets fan.
But yeah, he went through all of that, and was the guy for the Providence Friars for a lot of years too, for the Providence Journal. The great journalist and our good pal Kevin McNamara. How are you, Kev?
Hey guys, really appreciate it. I've been a fan of the Big East Rewind since you got going, because you basically have interviewed all my friends and some of my basketball heroes as well. So hey, we're Eastern guys, and Sonny, I'm born and bred in Rhode Island. I've covered the Friars for 32 years, but I got the poster right over there, Syracuse 2003. National champions. I mean,
you should.
Orange blood. It is what it is.
As you should. That's right. That's like you just have a couple drops.
Kev, you got Larry Bird choking out the doctor in that famous fight scene.
I do. I don't know how much you can see back there, but yeah, we got the.
It's a little dark, but yeah, I made it out.
I see the Masters. Like
I'm a golf freak, so it all adds up. We all had our little man caves, but during the pandemic, we had to make them look kind of good.
Yeah, because other people see it now.
I can see Chuck's. I can only imagine what he's got.
It's a little bit crazy. It's not looking good. I have to dress it up. It's a little bit down.
Are you kidding me? There's nothing left at the campus bookstore.
No, this was all legit, real stuff, not from the bookstore. I got to be honest with you. So Kev, talk to us. Like you started out as a student at Syracuse, and what made you get into journalism, and how did you get your start in that?
Yeah, well, it's a classic Big East story. So I'm going to school in high school here in Rhode Island, and it's time to go to college. And I thought I wanted to be in advertising, but really didn't know what that meant. And I knew I wanted to be in a somewhat big time sports operation. And at the time, the Big East their offices were right in Providence. They had just gotten going. I'm in high school in the early '80s, and I pick up the phone one day and I said, there's this guy, Mike Tranghese, who's always on at halftime of Friar, radio games. And now he's on, Big East TV games. And I said, well, I'd like to, talk to Mike Tranghese. Sure enough, the secretary, who I learned was Lisa. Lisa was there for 35 years. And she let me talk to Mike Tranghese. And Mike said, well, you can come into my office, Wednesday at 3:00. I said, well, I'm in high school. He said, high school? He said, well, how about 3:30? So I go up to Providence and meet with Mike Tranghese. And I said, well, Mike, I think everyone tells me that there's two great communication schools in the East. One is Boston University. The other is Syracuse. Yep. He says, well, BU is great, but you should just go to Syracuse and work for Larry Kimball. I said, Okay. I apply. I get in. I show up on the first day of school. I go to see Larry Kimball. He says, "Are you the guy who Mike said might work for me?" I said, "I'm the guy. I'm the guy." So he hires me, and I work as a basically 3 or 4 year sport work study, I guess it would be, for Syracuse Sports Information, and it was absolutely the perfect place to learn about the business.
Yeah, Chuck.
Yeah.
Larry Kimball was our sports information director. Good guy,
Oh,
really good
yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Well, listen, look at all the people that we've talked, just the people that we spoke with, Sonny, that have come out of Syracuse in that field. It's been unbelievable with
Hmm.
between being on air and journalists and everything that's come out of that from a communication standpoint. It was unbelievable, you
Well,
know.
Yep.
So from
guys,
our good friend Len Berman right on down,
yeah.
right?
Hey guys, I
So
got a classic story. So uh, my parents dropped me off. I'm at Brewster. Remember Brewster Boland, Sonny, down in the corner there?
My daughter lived there her freshman year in
There's
college, Brewster, and it still hasn't changed. Let me tell you.
That's
Go
where
ahead.
that's where they put all the freshmen, because you have the longest walk up to campus, and it is
Uphill.
the coldest walk in America. So that's where they put the freshmen. But anyways, my parents leave. We move in. It's a Sunday. Go downstairs to kind of the common area, and in the corner is a TV, and this guy is looking up at the TV, and I wouldn't say yelling at the TV, but he's talking to the TV. And then I get a little closer. He's clearly watching the NFL. He's watching a Jets game. It's my lifelong friend, Mike Tirica.
oh, there you go.
That's
I didn't know.
Syracuse.
I didn't know. I didn't know Mike was a Jets fan. I'm going to have to talk to him about
He
that.
certainly
Yeah.
is. Certainly is.
Yeah. Well, listen, a lot of Jet fans are talking to themselves an awful lot lately, Kev. You
Not,
know, I
not
mean
as not as much
that's
as
commonplace.
not as much as the Patriots fans, and I know that we get
Ooh,
no
Oh,
sympathy, but it is bad right now.
yeah,
yeah. There's
I
talk of
know.
getting rid of Belichick. I never thought I'd hear the day.
Well, my current deal is I work for WPRO, do a talk show on the Kevin Mack Sports Hour, and yes, the Patriot fans, they've had enough of Bill, which that's all it took is 3 years in a hopper. But it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.
Yeah.
It's something.
Well, listen, it goes. It's secular. Sports is, you know. So sometimes you're up and sometimes you're not. And they had a great run, and now they got to retool and try and do it again, right?
For sure.
So,
Heavy
all
work.
right. So now when you were there, now we were talking about this pre-show a little bit. So you were there with Ronnie Cycli and our good pal Derek Brower, right?
Yeah, those two.
So those were some great teams back then. I mean, Ronnie was a tough challenge for a guy like me, a big guy, and you know because he can move so well. He was kind of like one of the first kind of sort on the way to being a hybrid type center, where he wasn't necessarily a low post player. He could step out and move back in, and the game started changing. You know, after guys like Ronnie started playing. But talk about those teams, if you will, from when you were a student
Well,
at Syracuse.
well, certainly some of Boeheim's very, very best teams. I mean, stacked with talent. Certainly, one of the reasons I went to Syracuse was the dome. And again, I'm not a player by any stretch, but you knew that the big time teams were there. Pearl was a freshman. He hits the shot. Sonny's on the bench jumping up and down. That was my senior year of high school. So I arrive, and Pearl's an All American as a sophomore. You knew he was the show. Rath Addison, Wendell Alexis, and then this guy from Greece, who Bernie Fine kind of discovered at 5-star, gets added to their recruiting class, and people are like, who's Ronnie Cycli? And Boeheim absolutely crushes him for 2 years in practice. But boy, they did a great job developing this guy. But he played probably more than he should have as a freshman. As a sophomore, he was pretty good. As a junior, he's an important guy on a team that goes to the Final Four, and obviously
Yeah.
goes on to have a really long pro career. You know, this day and age, Ronnie Cycli would have been recruited at the highest level. At that point, he was not recruited highly at all, and they found a diamond in the rough.
They sure did.
Well, before they got rid of the dead weight in the graduating class of '85,
Yeah.
when they really started to achieve great things, what was interesting to me was, and to your point about Ronnie Cycli, Ronnie and Andre started all 4 years.
Andre
Right,
Hawkins,
he was
yeah.
high school player of the year, and here comes Ronnie, and now they put Ronnie at the 5, and Andre quote moves to the 4. But if you watch like some of the games and stuff, Andre's still covering Patrick Ewing and Ron, and it was a different mix. What did you think of that matchup with those two bigs? It was very unconventional, I think.
Yeah, very unconventional. He went, Boeheim went big. And think about it, Wendell Alexis was on that team, very, very good
Right.
player. And he
Right.
was, I guess you'd say, a small forward sometimes if they really wanted
Yeah.
to go really big. And Raph Addison was a very good player. I
Right.
mean, he was an all Big East level
Phenomenal.
wing scorer. So,
Underappreciated.
think about it. And again, Pearl's in the backcourt. I mean, that they had, and with Howard Trish and Greg Monroe, the lefty shooter as well. I mean, they had a lot of talent, really, really good team. And that was just, your last year, Sonny. And then they went on and kept adding, high level guys. Michael Brown came in, the shooter from Baltimore the following year. And then, of
Yeah, he
course,
came in with Pearl
the great class with
the next year.
Derek Coleman, Stevie Thompson, Earl Duncan. I mean, that's when they really, really were nationally recruiting at a very, very high level. And got to give Bernie Fine and Wayne Morgan and the recruit and the assistants at the time. And really, that's all. Is it all traced back to Pearl? Not all of it, but Pearl's impact was national.
100%. And like I said, once they got rid of some dead weight, 2 years later they're playing for a national title.
Yeah.
And now you've added Derek Coleman, Stevie Thompson. It kind of was the rich got richer. I mean, they really recruited some great talent now.
And
Well, Coach B tells the story that he was going out to California and he was getting stopped in the airport. That he was Pearl's coach.
Yeah.
So, like,
right.
those guys out in California got to see the big Monday games earlier in the day. So you race home from school, they were telling us, and
Yeah.
you get to watch Big Monday and get to see Pearl play on national television, and that helped a tremendous amount of
Help
getting
get Derek.
guys like Stevie and those guys to come in, and Derek.
Yeah,
No.
and Chuck, you can speak to it at Villanova. Again, I was fortunate to work in the sports information office, and all the games were on TV, and some games, I'd run stats. Other games, I'd work for ESPN and literally do the chords. The camera guy is under the hoop with his camera, and someone had to make sure he didn't trip, and I'd be sitting right next to the guy, and I'd see you guys play, and think of it, the talent in that 84 to 88. Pittsburgh was absolutely loaded with Charles Smith and Demetrius Gore, and you guys talk about this all the time in your show. It Chris Mullen. I mean, it was ridiculous. Every single team had All Americans.
Yeah, 84 national champs, 85 national champs, Georgetown, Nova, 87, Syracuse is playing with Providence in the Final Four, St. John's in the Final Four. So in a very infantile conference, they were the big boys pretty quick. So
no doubt.
Yeah, I think we were only 5 years into the conference, maybe 6, and we started winning championships. That doesn't happen very often, and credit to some of these guys that did all the recruiting for not the assistant coaches mainly. I mean, and they were road warriors back then, Kev.
Yeah.
These guys would get in their cars and drive. There was no social media to see what everything was about, and they would drive all night long and get back and then be at practice, the next day.
Well,
for some of these
the great
tough.
The great Brendan Malone, who just passed away this week, he would be able to tell the stories of 5-star. I mean, 5-star was unbelievable in that era. That's the first place. I didn't attend 5-star, but you guys know the magazine. Actually, I never forget the day I'm in my Coventry High School library, and Eastern Basketball is there. Remember the Eastern Basketball magazine?
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you see Patrick Ewing, and a cover of Eastern Basketball. I'm like, oh, that's the kid from Cambridge who comes down twice a year and plays high school basketball against Rhode Island teams and wins by 40 points. And he's Patrick Ewing. I mean, it's like seeing God in the flesh at Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And sure enough, he put the Big East totally on the map. And to your point, Chuck, the Hoyas win the title in 1984. The league's only 5 years old.
Right, and they're playing in '82, right? And they have Georgia, and they have North Carolina on the ropes.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So 80 was the first year, 81. So in the second year, we're playing for a national championship with Patrick and his fellas. But I don't know if too many other conferences can say that.
No doubt.
Yeah, and it was a mix. It wasn't just the same couple of teams. You know, when Providence gets to the Final Four, Syracuse gets to the Final Four. You know,
Seton Hall in '89, right? Seton Hall.
Seton
89
Hall had a great run.
had
Yeah,
that game.
TJ and those guys. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't watch that replay. That'll
Tough.
give you heartburn. That's a
So,
bad call.
matter of fact, we had Keith Smart on with Howard Trish
Oh,
to talk about the '87 game, and you know what, Kev? It was the first time that those two guys had been in the same, kind of room, where they can have a conversation about what happened. And Howard was like, "How did you get open?" He had no idea, right, Sonny?
He did, yeah. And then he wondered what they said at halftime because Keith Smart had a terrible first half, and Keith had actually described how Bobby Knight basically said, "I made a mistake on you. I shouldn't have given you a scholarship." And blah 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 blah. And he came out and lit it up in the second half.
Yeah.
You never know.
yes.
He basically threatened his playing career is what he did. Kevin.
Yeah.
And then so that tends to motivate people in a tight spot, I think.
And I know,
sometimes. I don't know.
Coach Boeheim kind of refused to watch the replay of that game for many
Yeah.
years. He couldn't bring himself to it.
I don't know if he's ever watched it.
Yeah,
I really don't.
I'll tell a story about that night. I was there. I had to go as a student, so I would have been a junior in college, and we all drove from Syracuse to the Meadowlands the weekend before. And North Carolina was
Right.
favored to beat Syracuse. They had J.R. Reed, who was pretty much the number one player in the country at the time. Scott Williams, I think, was on the team. I mean, they were very
Yep.
good. Maybe Lebo. I mean, they were very good. Syracuse beats them, and of course, on the way back, you got to go to New Orleans. Go to the Final Four. Of course, they have no money, so getting that done was a coup in itself. And then they win, beat Providence in the semifinals, and got to play Indiana, which had beaten Vegas. And I'm staying at the Syracuse team hotel because sports information and all that kind of connection stuff, like 6 to a room and whatnot. And then afterwards, we go back to the hotel, and it's not pretty. Obviously, a devastating loss. I'll never forget Derek Coleman's mom. I think her name was Daisy or Dazzy Coleman, and she's not happy. Derek had missed some free throws down the stretch, which really hurt. And she was upset with Derek. I'm like, oh my God, I'm seeing a family intervention here where mom is not happy and Derek's not happy, and it was hard. It really was hard, and that's why to see, Syracuse get it done in New Orleans in 2003, lifetime away from that. Redemption was sweet. That's for sure.
I got to ask you a question. Do you have a Coach Boeheim impersonation? Because everybody seems to have one.
I'm not too good with impersonations, but it was funny. Again, sports information. Larry Kimball was a larger than life guy, and Jim would occasionally. So the mail room was attached to the sports information. As soon as you walked in the Manley Fieldhouse, Sports Info was on the left, and the mail room was there. So occasionally I'd have to do the mail, put this, Coach McPherson, the football coach, and the field hockey coach, and they would actually have to come to the mail room to get their mail. This is 1986. So Boeheim would be very quiet. He would come in, he'd get his mail and leave. But when he was mad, he would keep walking in and go in to Larry Kimball. And who knows what they talked about. But let's just say that it got very, very loud in Larry Kimball's office from time to time. I'm like, uh-oh, not good. Coach Boeheim, not pleased. And then, to his credit, he would walk right out, nice and quiet. You'd say hello and whatnot. But he was not, he handled things, I guess, the way you're supposed to handle it. In this day and age, I guess you just get somebody on their cell phone and chew them out. But you'd have to go get your mail. You got to, keep on going and then talk to Larry Kimball.
The old school. Coach B's old school.
Yeah. So now you wind up going straight from Syracuse right to the Providence Journal. Now you interned 1 or 2 years before you graduated. Was it 2 seasons or one that you were?
Yeah.
That you interned.
So my deal was I ended up working for the Syracuse papers, the Post Standard, as a senior in college. covering some high school stuff and doing a little bit with Syracuse lacrosse. I think I remember going to see some local football players who ended up being really good. Basketball players. Trying to think of his name. He was went on to St. John's. Jason Buchanan. Remember that name? He's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
point guard at St. John's. He was a senior in high school when I was a senior in college. So they had really high end high school sports in Syracuse. Anyways, then also did a internship at the Providence Journal before I graduated. I graduate, nothing's going on. Interview a few places, and then Providence opened up in August of, I guess it'd be '88. Did high schools for a year, covered the University of Rhode Island basketball for a year. Al Skinner was the coach. Kenny Green, who was a really good player in the Atlantic 10, he
Yeah,
was the star
Al
center.
Skinner.
And then the next year, start covering Providence. And the very first year, might have covered the best player that Providence had for like 25 years. It was Eric Murdoch. Eric Murdoch,
Yeah.
ended up leading the Big East in scoring and was a first round pick of the Utah Jazz. And Rick Barnes was the coach at the time, and he was a really young coach. I was a really young, beat writer, and we kind of grew up together for a little bit. And they can't get rid of me, Chuck. I'm still doing it.
Were you in Providence when Brendan had the Rhode Island job?
I was not. I was in college. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah, because he took it. He left Syracuse my junior year, so probably '83. He was at U of R, Rhode Island. Excuse me.
Yeah. So
Right.
Again,
84.
small world. I grew up in a town called Coventry. Our rival next door
Yeah.
was West Warwick, Rhode Island, and their best player, my graduating year, was Tom Garrick, and he's kind of getting recruited by Stonehill and some small Division ones, but really not many. And Brendan Malone sees him after his senior year in high school and offers him. He's the head coach at Rhode Island at the time, so he gets Tommy Garrick, Silk Owens, and the year after he gets Kenny Green, and then leaves to go coach, I believe, the Knicks as an assistant.
Yeah, it was assistant with the Knicks. Yeah.
And hands over those three guys to Tom Penders, who ends up taking them to the Sweet 16 in 1988, beat Syracuse. My last college game, Rhode Island beats Syracuse with Tommy Garrick scoring, like 28 points. So small world,
You had to
How
drop.
ironic
You
is
had
that?
you
Yeah.
couldn't have left that out. You couldn't have left that part out.
Wasn't good. It's not a good way to go out.
No, that's
So-
how do you, I cringe hearing it. That's like when we lost to Richmond.
Oof.
So your career with the Journal, lasted 30 years. So you've had a lot of time with the Providence Friars. Okay, so through that time, they've had several coaching changes. So I'm going to name a couple coaches, and then you give us a story or two, or an anecdote, or your thoughts on those particular guys. Okay,
Sure.
Rick Pitino.
Well, I missed Coach Patino, so he would have been gone.
I'll strike one for me. I didn't do my. See, we broadcast ourselves as
Professional
journalists. I
journalists.
come out of the gate thinking I got a great segment. Boom.
Actually, I'm good. So I did say I did an internship at the Journal before I was hired.
All right.
So
Thank you for saving me. That was a good save,
yeah.
Kev.
So it's 87. Okay.
You're invited back.
Yeah, it's 87, and Bill Reynolds is our larger than life, columnist. I knew him like nothing at that time, and he's like, "Hey, let's go to this press conference. They're doing a press conference downtown. Patino's, he's going to announce he's staying." I said, "Sure, I'll go to that." So we go around the corner, and Players Corner Pub was the place for all old time Big East people. That was the spot. And sure enough, downstairs, Patino's like, "Oh, I love the Friars. I'm going to sign a new contract, and we're all good." Literally, like 3 weeks later, he's the coach of the New York Knicks. So that was about the only professional event that I went to when Rick Pitino was actually coaching in Providence. But of course, he comes back many times throughout my career.
How about Coach Barnes, Rick Barnes?
Coach Barnes was first of all, he was great to me. I really enjoyed Coach Barnes. At the time, he was, again, a young coach. He was only had been a coach for one season at George Mason before he came into the Big East. And he tells the story. He's like, my first Big East meeting, I look around and you got John Thompson, you got Rolly Massimino, you got Carnesecca, you got PJ, you got Boeheim. And he's like, wow, this is a problem. And that said, no one ran a harder practice. Back then, Chuck and Sonny, there were not limits on time. And Rick had this drill. It was a rebound drill where literally, so it was at Alumni Hall at Providence. The stands are all pushed in, the wooden stands are pushed in, and the rebound drill didn't end until someone got the rebound, and the outlines of the court were not part of the deal. You would go right into the walls, right into the baselines or sidelines to get rebounds, and these were like big aggressive guys: Michael Smith, Dickie Simpkins, Eric Williams,
Dickey.
Austin Crozier, and I was like, wow. And physical. Providence was not never the most talented team with Rick Barnes, but they always really rebounded and were very physical and tough. And it ended up, their big highlight was they won the school's very first Big East tournament in 1994. It ended up being Rick's last year.
Wow. How about a former Villanova guy, a former guy that was on Coach Massimino's staff, Pete Gillen?
Pete Gillen is exactly how you see him as TV. He's the kind of guy you want to shoot the breeze with for 5 minutes, and then you want him to stick around for another 45. He's a sweetheart of a guy, and he is that funny. I mean, that's how he is. So, the good part of being the Providence beat writer is, you talk to the coach during the season 3-4 times a week. I mean, certainly before every game and after every game. And to get Pete Gillen on the phone was just a treat, an absolute treat. And oftentimes I'd be like, "Oh, Pete, slow down, slow down. I can't write that fast." And the lines were so good, you wanted to get them correct because post game he was unbelievable, and even on the off days on the telephone he was just as good. And just a sweetheart of a man. I'll never forget. I have my first child. It's Maggie. She's a girl, and oh, Kevin, so happy. And Pete has 3 children as well. Kevin, so happy that you had a daughter because when you get old, you now have someone to take care of you, and that's how the old Irish think. And I'll never forget that story.
Yeah. How about, I got a couple more. How about a guy that we've had on the show, and he was quite the character, Bobby Gonzalez.
Oh, Gonzo. So Gonzo was great. Pete Gillen's staff. I'll put Pete Gillen's staff and Rick Pitino's staff in 1987 up against any staff in the history of the Big East. So Pete Gillen's staff, as soon as he got hired, was Gonzo, was Louis Orr,
Yep.
was Mike Malone, who just won the title with the Denver Nuggets. Tommy Herrion was on that staff. He was every single one of them went on to head coaching at a very high level. And of course, Mike Malone just won the NBA championship with the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah.
I will say that 87 Pitino staff. So Stu Jackson,
Yep.
Jeff Van Gundy, Billy Donovan
Jeff
was
Van Gundy.
obviously a player.
Billy Donovan. Yep.
I'm leaving out someone else who was very very high end. Gordy Chaser, who went on to assistant with the Utah Jazz for like 25 years with Stockton and Malone. So really good
He
staff.
was one of the greatest speakers at a basketball camp I've ever seen. Gordy Chiesa.
Gordy.
He did it. He did a thing. He finally would bring a kid out to play 1-on-1, and if the kid got burnt, he put Noxzema on his face. So every time that somebody got burnt, he would say Noxzema, and he would swipe. You had guys looking like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. They were covered with Noxzema. So he was great. I loved Gordy. He was really good. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Ed Cooley.
Sure.
So let's get into that a little bit. Tell us about your experiences with him.
Well, again, Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a small place. Rhode Island basketball is a small world. Literally, I've known Ed Cooley since he was in high school. He was the best high school player in the state for 2 years, so covered him a little bit there. He tells a great story. He's all state after his junior year at Central High School, and then so he meets all the Providence Journal writers, obviously, and then as a senior, he's the best player in the state, and he walks into the Providence Journal sports department, and he wants to sit down and talk with our high school writer Paul Kenyon and help him pick the all-state team. That's it. That's Ed Cooley. And then he gets hired as Al Skinner's graduate assistant at the University of Rhode Island. And I'm covering the team, the URI team. So that's really where I got to know Ed Cooley. So at the time, I don't know, he was 21, 22 years old. And then, hey, Ed Cooley, what a meteoric rise. He becomes a head coach at Fairfield. Obviously, good run at Boston College with Al as an assistant. Great staff there. Tim O'Shea. You should have him on this show,
Yeah.
by the way. He's got a million
Timmy.
stories.
Timmy's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be great.
Yeah. Bill Cohen, who's the current head coach at Northeastern, and Ed Cooley, really good staff. That's why Boston College was good at the end of their time in the Big East. And as soon as they joined the ACC, he had a great staff. And then he becomes the head coach of Providence, and a great run, just a great run for 12 years. Totally transformed the program, elevated the financing and the fundraising around the program, really with his persona, and winning, his timing, and the timing of the new Big East and Providence's success in the new Big East all came together and made again a great run.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm and a perfect match. I mean, it was hard to see him, move to Georgetown because I just he's to me synonymous with Providence, and I as just as a fan, I don't know him personally, but as a fan, I'm a huge advocate and fan of everything that he does.
It's funny because we're in touch with a lot of the Providence guys, and even before we started doing the show, and and Harold Starks and I played on a couple of teams together. We had a good time with those guys. But I would say to you, I really like what he does with the basketball alumni. All right, that other coaches don't get involved with. And I'm talking with Sonny. And some of the Georgetown guys who didn't have that kind of relationship, especially the Georgetown guys with Coach Thompson, and so they had an event not too long ago, not too long before Ed left, and they had probably 150 players, and like every coach, Barnes had COVID, but he was on a big screen on a Zoom call. They had Gonzo, they had Pete, they had all the guys back.
Everybody,
was there. Billy was there, and what a blast they had. They went on a cruise boat together, and they played Family Feud, the '87 team versus the '93 team versus the '72 team, and it was really great. And he was the guy that put all of that together. It was all Ed's doing. And I think, I don't know the circumstances that he left. It was odd that he went from one Big East team to another. To me, that's kind of an unwritten rule, I think. But that was a tough one. But I've told the guys from Georgetown, because we actually speak with those guys on a regular basis. But I've told the guys from Georgetown, I said, you guys are lucky to have this guy, because the first thing he did when he got there, Kev, was he had a conference call with about 80 or 90 former Hoyas and said, hey, we want you back. We want you to come to practice. We want you to be around. We want to see you. We want to, that kind of thing. And I told Reggie Williams, I said, you're not gonna recognize your school in a couple of years, because this guy is gonna celebrate the history of the university. And he did that at Providence. And you know what? Who knew? I didn't realize what kind of rich history they had there, right? I mean, there's a lot of great guys there, Kevin.
No, you hit it spot on, Chuck. Ed Cooley is a lot of things, but number one, he's a people person. He brings people together. He has just an infectious personality, and that's why he's a good recruiter. Forget about being a good coach. It's all about players. But he's a great salesman. He would have been an unbelievable salesman as a drug rep. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. You want to. He has that type of personality. And I was at that event. Would have been last summer, 2 summers ago.
Yep.
They had a public forum. Then they had like a reception at nighttime. I went to the reception. It was like I was seeing my nephews, because I've kind of covered all these guys, and they're like, wow, you're still doing this. I'm like, I'm not that old. Okay. I'm not that old, but I am still doing it. And it was great to see some people who I hadn't seen since they were 22 years old and left Providence in, 1994. I mean, it was really cool. And Harold Starks, by the way, is really the point man for that. And I appreciate you giving him
Oh
Oh
a
yeah,
yeah.
shout out. But Ed Cooley will
So
definitely do that at Georgetown. There's no question about it. He sees value in
yeah.
it. Number one, uh, hey, Reggie Williams or somebody else might have a connection to a recruit someday. I mean, why not? Um, and the Thompsons were great, and the Thompsons were legendary. But that wasn't a strong suit for Big John for sure.
No,
all
he
right.
wasn't. He wasn't warm and fuzzy with his guys. That's for sure. We've had many conversations with many different players, and it was all basically the same stuff. And when we tell them about what we experienced, and listen, Thompson and Massimino were two of the all-time greatest screamers.
Right.
I think we could all agree on that. But at the end of the day, Coach Mass would sit down over pasta with you and talk about life and talk about, hey, you could be doing this better and you could be doing that better, that kind of thing. Or you'd get a hug. These guys were like, what you saw on the court is what you got off the court, with Coach Thompson. I mean, it was, and that's just his style, and it worked for them. They were very, very successful, and now there's going to be a new style there, I think, and it's a little bit of a culture shock to some of the former guys because they all don't know what to make of it.
No,
Never experienced it before.
he'll be warm and fuzzy. I will say with the transfer portal, it won't take him long. That said,
Yeah,
the big challenge for Ed Cooley is, the theory is, you leave Providence to go to a quote national program like Georgetown. That was a long time ago, guys. That was a long time ago. So can Georgetown still be a national program? We'll see. I do think that they have a good coach. I think Ed Cooley is a good coach, which is, that's players and coaching, right? Those are the two things. We'll find out. We'll find out pretty soon.
yeah. It
All right.
seems it seems that he's doing well with the NIL stuff because you need to recruit guys to do that. I mean, it's from what it looks like from an outsider's perspective. It looks like he's doing fine with that. You see him on social media in New York City, with a bunch of alums. I didn't see the previous coaches, not even Coach Thompson, but I didn't see Patrick doing that. I didn't see JT3 doing that. I
Mhm.
didn't see, some of the other coaches that they had there doing those kinds of things. Maybe they weren't as social media savvy as Ed is, but I see him out there all the time on that. So
Well,
pretty good.
I'll be critical here. I think Georgetown kind of rode their tradition and their aura, and instead of working it. And Ed Cooley's going to
Yeah.
work it. He's going to work it because at Providence you have to work it, and they had again found the perfect person for it in Ed Cooley for 12 years to work it, and he is going to get after it at Georgetown. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Well, all right. I have to come full circle. Okay. You can claim Providence a little bit as home as well. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not just Syracuse. You, I think I went a little too far on that one.
That's okay. That's right. Hey, Sonny, I got to get back there. Because they're in that goofy league down south. I haven't been back to
I
Syracuse in a
know.
long
I
time.
know. It's a painful thing for me because I love what we had. I love I love the conference, the new invention, or the new Big
Mhm.
East, what they call. And I think we belong there. But you're right. It's a different animal. The ACC and the environment and now with the realignments of the conferences, forget about it. Cal,
Yeah.
Stanford. I mean, what are we doing here? It's like
I hate to say that we're
it's.
old, but guys, we're getting there, and it's not anything like we knew. That's number one, and the fans, you know, I, Mike Waters, who I know you've had on the show on your podcast here, he knows Syracuse and the program better than anybody. And I remember texting him maybe 10 years ago. They were in the ACC, and I'm like, "Wow, Mike, not a big crowd tonight." I'm looking, and they're playing, somebody decent, Florida State or Notre Dame. He says, "Kevin, there hasn't been crowds like that in a long time." And
Yeah.
hopefully with the new coach, and Adrian and winning and getting back in the top 25 on a consistent basis, we can see those 30,000 crowds at Syracuse again. But it's a different world.
Well, what's funny is the Big East was literally almost drivable, so you could drive to most every game from every other location, and it just it bred those natural rivalries. It wasn't just Syracuse Georgetown was a rivalry. You had rivalries all over the place, many ones, but other ones. So it's a hard time. And you're right. If Clemson is playing Syracuse, there is not a lot of interest in that basketball game. And there's not going to be. It's just very difficult geographically to recreate that. But what you mentioned, if you get in the top 25 and you become competitive on a bigger scale, people are going to want to see your product, right?
Well, and Chuck, you can speak to this. You're from Long Island, highly recruited. I'm sure your parents wanted to see you play, right? I mean, I'm sure that was
Oh, sure.
the road games and home games, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
That was a big thing. I mean, and that when BC and Syracuse both left the conference, neither of them did as well as they were doing, at least in basketball,
Mm-hmm.
while they were in the conference.
Right.
So it was one of those things. And BC in particular, it just seems like all their sports programs kind of tanked a little bit after they left because you couldn't get you couldn't recruit the kids that you were recruiting because they all wanted to stay closer to home.
we all have children, and if Sonny's kids are going to Syracuse, he wants to be able to go to a road game and see them play without jumping on a plane. And just not the case at certain schools because of these conferences are so far flung.
Right.
Yeah.
So, got to ask you. So, after Providence and the covering, let's talk a little bit about what it was like in the pro sports because Boston is always talked about as a pro town. What was it like? First and foremost, the '86, the Mets beat the Red Sox, and it's Bill Buckner's crush forever. But then you come back. Talk a little bit about that vibe of the resurgence of their baseball program, and then the Celtics, even right, the Bird era, and then when it gets back to competing for that championships, right? They're all about championships in Boston.
Yeah, well, it took a while to be all about championships, but when I was
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I was a kid, it was the Bird era Celtics, and that's really where I got addicted to basketball. I mean, that was my first love, and
Yeah, how could you
yeah,
not?
and really it goes back.
Unbelievable.
I'm a little younger, and it's Dave Collins and John Havlicek and the '70s. They won in '74 and '76 as well. So really a basketball crazed person. But Red Sox, you make a good point. I'm in college, surrounded by these Mets and Yankees fans, and in '86. The ball goes through Buckner's legs, and I'm surrounded by Mets and Yankees fans, and that was a difficult stretch being a Syracuse student for sure. But then to get into the business and cover more heartbreak in the '90s, and then to finally see them break through. Literally, I'm at Yankee Stadium in 2003 when Aaron Boone hits the home run, the walk-off home run to
I was there as well.
yeah,
Yep.
and I'm like the fifth Providence Journal writer, and they're all going to the Red Sox, and they say, "Oh, by the way, why don't you go to the Yankees?" And I'm like getting in the scrum to interview Aaron Boone. I'll never forget it. It was such joy. And then, am I a Red Sox fan? No, but I wanted to see the Red Sox win. I can guarantee you that. So that was interesting. And then 12 months later to see them break the curse and win in 2004. I've never seen a sports celebration like that. Never will again in my life. Literally, people going to graveyards and putting baseballs on their grandfather and dad's
Yeah.
and mother's graves. I mean, it was unbelievable, and it
That's
will never be a
that's
pro.
unbelievable.
And then
Well,
Let me ask you about that, Kev, for a
it
second.
was more than a mystique. People actually
Oh,
believe that Curse of the Bambino thing.
oh yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there were people who were lifelong Red Sox fans and died without seeing the Red Sox win one time. And,
Mhm.
the
Right.
Celtics are big here. The Patriots have eclipsed the Red Sox, I think, in this era just because of what Brady did for 20 years. But in that time, the '80s, '90s, into the 2000s, the Red Sox were the top dog in New England, no question. And
Yeah, it was a baseball town.
yeah, and to see
Yeah.
them, not win was difficult for an awful lot of people.
As a big Yankee fan, watching them, it was kind of surreal because to see the great Mariano Rivera, falter a little bit and look human, right? And then he comes back and they give him a standing ovation on Ring Day on the very next year. So that now he's had an affiliation with the Red Sox fans. He's been cemented in their lore just by what he did. But what I was fascinated with was they when they won that series, they won that at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So and when that happened, the players' wives and everybody, they were all out dancing on the pitcher's mound and going crazy. And somebody in the security office asked Steinbrenner, "You want me to turn off the lights?" And he said, "No, it's been 83 years. Let them have their moment." He left the light. I thought that was pretty cool of him to do that. I mean, because that
Because
that
that's
was
not like
that
him.
was, and as a fan, I couldn't help but feel good for my friends that are Red Sox fans that we constantly go back and forth with and have fun with. But man, it was really surreal for a Yankee fan to watch that. Watching them dance on the pitcher's mound like that.
Yeah, two stories. So again, we're in interviewing or whatnot. Go back to the press box, type the story, and you're right. This is hour and a half after the game, maybe 2 hours, and there's still people lingering on the field, and the lights are dim but on. And I end up asking one of the beat writers who would know the families, and they said, "Oh no, that's Mrs. Wakefield, and that's Varitek's wife." And I mean, they were. This was big time, right? And then I go out
Yeah.
to St. Louis for the World Series. So the Red Sox win the first two at home, and then they have a chance to get it done out in St. Louis. In Game 4, I'm in the stands almost. Maybe I'm ready to do a story about the fans. And literally, the St. Louis fans were so nice. I mean, it just shows, we're East Coast, tough guys, right? Out in the Midwest, they're like actually nice people, and they're literally congratulating Red Sox fans. Oh, I feel so happy for you. I'm thinking to myself, a week ago, I'm at Yankee Stadium. They're ready to kill you, and now the Cardinal fans are, congratulating your team. It was bizarre.
That is crazy.
Yeah,
They're actually nice people. We're all a bunch of dicks, but they're really nice.
yeah, they're
people.
really nice people. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know exactly what you mean too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So talk about the Celtic experience that you had, dealing with those guys and making the transition from the big three to the Garnett and Pierces and that era.
Yeah, again, Larry Bird was my guy. He's behind me,
Yep.
and so I get hired in '89, and at the time, the Journal, we covered every game at home, and our beat writer would occasionally need some days off. So I started actually covering, Larry Bird at the end, and it was unbelievable. It really was to see. We'd have seats right near the bench. I mean, it was great. So then, 5-6 years later, Larry is a coach for the Indiana Pacers, and Austin Crozier is one of his very first draft picks.
Big players.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Providence is playing Purdue. Providence College is playing Purdue. So we're in Indianapolis, and it's a Friday night. The game is Saturday daytime. Stay in Indy. And Austin Crozier is going to come out and have dinner with us on Friday night. So I'm like, I'll go to the game. The Pacers are playing Friday night, and Larry Bird's the coach. I'm like, oh boy, I want to go talk to Larry about Austin and do a little story. And Larry could not have been better. It was, again, I don't get awestruck by many people at all. It was a treat to meet Larry one-on-one and talk about Austin. Might have only lasted 3 or 4 minutes, but he's Larry Bird and I'm Kevin McNamara, so it was a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
But
pretty cool.
to answer your question,
Eddie was on that team back then too when you were covering them, right?
I'm sorry.
Pickney was on that team too when you were
He
covering
was.
them back at the end of Larry's career.
Pickney, Sherman Douglas, then came in.
Sure.
Sherman had a nice little run. John Bagley was good with the Celtics for a couple of years. There was, again, so many good players, from the Big East ended up coming through. And then I was actually on the beat in '08 when Ray Allen and KG come to Boston to pair up with Paul Pierce and Rondo, and that was obviously that was a great run for the Celtics, and they ended up getting another banner.
I got to ask you a question. You talked about a couple things, but the Larry Bird. When you were sitting there, did you ever hear like any of the trash talking stuff? Because he is a well-known trash talker, and there's just legendary stories about I'm going to do this, I'm going to catch it and go here. Any of those things that you ever were a part of or see or anything?
I can't say I did. can't. But he was to see him live, and I know you guys probably saw him, play in person. It was like, why is he so good? I mean, he was not fast. He was quick. Was not fast. I will say he's a lot bigger than most people think. I mean, he was a broad-shouldered 6'9", and that's why he was such a good rebounder. But as a basketball person like you guys, the thing that he could do that other guys couldn't do, he was an unbelievable passer. I mean, unbelievable
Oh yeah,
passer. Everyone
And
knows
he was steps ahead of
football,
everybody.
but he had
Yeah.
great
yeah.
feel. I mean, he made everyone else better, and that was his
Yeah.
beauty.
No, the
Yeah.
question was, I was thinking it was John Feinstein wrote about in his book when he would go to those the meetings and the lunches with Red Auerbach, and let me tell you a story. Red Auerbach thought very highly of Sherman Douglas even back then, because Red lives in the D.C. area,
Right.
and so it was on his radar to get him to Boston. It wasn't like an accident. He thought very highly of him as he was even in a high school player. So it's kind of interesting to see that whole thing come full circle.
Yeah, Red was at the I would cover George Washington from time to time with Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
He was at those games all the time. He went to a lot of college games. He was a regular at the Big East tournament. He sat with Dave Gavitt, like 6 rows up. I'm like, oh my God, there's Red Auerbach and Dave Gavitt together watching the Big East tournament.
Wow.
That happened year after year in the '80s. Really did.
Yeah, that mean yeah,
Talk about being awestruck.
yeah, that's a duo right there. That's a
I feel like that when I walk in front of his bench at the Quincy Market.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, there's Red Auerbach's bench.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great. So we're getting up against it a little bit, Kev. But let me ask you about covering Tommy Touchdown, Tom Brady. In the Super Bowl era with all of the. Geez, it seemed like they were winning every year, man. If they weren't winning, they were in the Super Bowl every year. I have to tell you that.
So a million stories about the Pats, because I did have to. For 30 years, I was up there on a regular basis. But come playoff time, I'm covering the Friars and the Big East. So I would maybe go to some home games, but the road games, other people at the Journal would do them. Tom Curran, who I think you guys have heard of, he covers them now. Jim Donaldson was our longtime columnist, and he covered the Patriots for literally 40 years. So literally, I would be on the road. I'll never forget one of the most famous Patriot games of all time. The last one to close the old stadium was the Tuck Rule game, right? Tom Brady gets hit by the Raiders. I am literally on Miami Beach after a Providence University of Miami game with Joe Hassett and John Rook, the longtime radio guys. And, we're in shorts and flip-flops. The Patriots are back in the Snow Bowl game up in Foxborough. And, like, well, yeah, I'd love to cover the Super Bowl one day, right? I mean, at that point, Patriots are just getting going. Eventually, they go to 1 million Super Bowls. A few guys retire at the Journal. I ended up doing a little bit of everything, so I ended up doing 3 Super Bowls. So the very first one was in Atlanta against in the famous 28-3 game. They're down 28-3. Typing the story. They're in deep, deep trouble. It's not going to happen. They're playing Atlanta.
It's against Atlanta.
They're playing Atlanta. I'm sorry. The game is in Houston. Yeah. And I'm like so nervous. It's my first Super Bowl. The halftime show is unbelievable. It's Lady Gaga. I'm like, this is unbelievable. The Patriots are getting annihilated. It's 28-3. So I'm doing my story. The story's done. I mean, the story is basically done. And all of a sudden, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And Brady hits Edelman, and Brady does this, and Hightower has a strip sack. And I see literally my first Super Bowl game, the greatest comeback in the history of the Super Bowl. It'll never be topped. And, and then the next one they lose in a game that they had no business losing. Sorry, to Philadelphia in Minnesota. And then the very last one in Atlanta, they beat the Rams. So I saw 3 Super Bowls in like 4 seasons, and
pretty good run.
It's a pretty good run. And Tom Brady's Tom Brady. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, around the football world, he did a lot wrong. Deflategate and all that crazy stuff. He was unbelievable with the media, routinely. Now, did he say a lot? No, but he did it with a smile. And I can't say enough about good things about Tom Brady.
You went to the Bill Belichick School of Questions and Answers.
Eric Jeter School of Broadcasting, right?
Oh, come on! How about a Bill Belichick post game
Oh,
How about a little impersonation of that? Well, we got to do better in all three phases.
we got to play better. We got to coach better. We got to coach better. We got to play better. Again, I don't do impressions well, but let's just say that
Yeah.
I will say Belichick. We'll see what happens here. They've never been worse in Bill Belichick's 22 years. They've never been worse. Who knows? Now he's a great coach. Could he bring them back? He's not going to bring them back this year. They could be somewhat competitive, but they're in a world of hurt right now. And
Yeah.
I never thought I'd see this with Bill Belichick as the coach.
Well, let me ask you this then: do you think he would stay on as coach if they brought a new GM in?
No, because think about this.
Because that's what you need. You've had some bad drafts.
No question, bad. But would you want to be the GM and have Bill Belichick as the coach and tell him what to do? That's just it. Just doesn't work. He's always going to be in charge.
Right. I don't. I just, since you are part of it, I know what I would think. I trust 1,000%. You know exactly what would go on. So
Well, and you know what scenario would it be? Maybe if it's that bad, Bill just retires. I mean, it's Don Shula's
Yeah.
record is about 28, 30 wins away. At this stage, that would be 2.5, 3 more years. I don't see him wanting to go through the hopper. Tim Welsh used to say, when things aren't going good, you're in the hopper. You just got to get out of the hopper. Bill Belichick's in the hopper right now, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody goes through it, I guess, at some point in time or another.
That's it.
That game you mentioned, that 28-3 comeback. The Villanova '85 guys would go down to see Coach Mass every year down in Florida. So, and we'd have, I don't know, 14 or 15 of us, coaches, managers, the whole shooting match down there, and we'd all crash out all over his house. You'd have to step over a 6'8" guy to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And Mark Plansky, who's a Boston guy, he's rooting for, obviously, for the Pats, and everybody is torching him when it's 28-3, and he's outside. He didn't even want to be with the rest of us. He couldn't take it. He comes back in, and all of a sudden, now he's the world's biggest fan. He's jumping up and down. He's high fiving guys. Guys are rooting against Tom Brady and these guys just to break Mark's chops, and so that's where I was for that game.
That's what friends are for.
Oh yeah, that was some game, man. It was, but
I
I had to hear about it from Mark every time I'm together with him. That he reminds me of that game.
I will say, traveling around the NFL for a couple of years, the Patriot fans would come out in force, because they're a winner. The Patriot fans are hated, maybe more than any other group in the NFL right now. Who knows? Everyone hates a winner, right? And they were a winner for a long time, and there is no pity for the Patriots in the NFL right now.
No, none. You're right about that. It's funny how that goes with fandom, and to see some of these places, that big cities that haven't had winning teams in a long time, all of a sudden when they finally win, like the Cubs, the Red Sox, we got to see both of those in short succession. It wasn't that long between each other. And Theo Epstein was the guy that flipped both of those around. How about that for a legacy? It's unbelievable.
It really is. The Red Sox need him back.
I gotta ask you one final question, honestly. In all your basketball travels and as a fan, what was the single greatest memory or moment in a basketball game that you can think of?
I was at the Garden, the old Garden, the Boston Garden, which you guys were fortunate enough to play in.
Yeah, with all the dead spots? Yeah.
Well, I can't attest to that. I never played at the Garden.
That's okay. Yeah. Nobody from Boston ever owns up to it. That's okay.
Yeah. But I was there the night that Larry Bird stole the ball against the Pistons and fed DJ. That was unbelievable. That was unbelievable. And needless to say, Isaiah Thomas has never forgotten it.
No, That's true.
Yeah,
that is very true. That I tell you what, that's a good way to wrap this up today, Kev. We've been spending time with Kevin McNamara from the Providence Journal, 30 years, and all his highlights that he's been involved with when covering sports in the New England area. and we appreciate how you coming out and hanging with us for a little while. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us, Kev.
Oh, you're welcome. And great Big East memories. You guys do a great job. I really appreciate it.
Well,
Kevin, thanks a million. It was
thanks
great.
a lot. Hang out for a few minutes. We'll talk to you as soon as we wrap this up. So the Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. Also, our partners, our new partners that are helping us improve the show, graphics, and everything like that is Boundless Ventures. You could see us everywhere you go. You get your social media by putting Big East Rewind in the space bar, and also wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Again, on the search bar, put Big East Rewind. We ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much for joining us. You guys have a great day. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody.